Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Work for Climate webinar, How to Make Your Job Your Most Powerful Climate Tool. My name is Laure Legros. I am the Head of Experience at Work for Climate, and I'll be your host for today. I am joined by the rest of the Work for Climate team, Lucy and Henry. Do you want to introduce yourselves, Lucy and Henry?
Hi everyone, I'm Lucy. I'm the Director of Work for Climate. Henry, I'll hand to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Henry, the digital marketer on the team here.
Thanks. And I'd like to start by acknowledging and welcoming to the call all traditional owners and custodians of the land that each of us joins the call from today. I am joining from the land of the Gadigal people. Without a doubt, we need the wisdom that they bring and share with us to guide this work. So I'd like to pay my respect to elders, past, present, and emerging. And let's hold this in our awareness for the entire session and beyond. I also would like to remind you that we are in the very last stretch of the Voice to Parliament campaign. The Yes campaign needs our help, and the best way that we can help at the moment is by having conversations with people in our networks that may still be undecided. We're going to paste a resource in the chat to help you do that. And yes, this is a very critical moment and every vote counts. Thank you. So our agenda for today, I will kick us off with a presentation on the very topic of the webinar, how to make your job your most powerful climate tool. Then I'm really excited to be joined by one of our climate entrepreneurs, a member of the Work for Climate community, Laura Wilson from Specialized. And then finally, we'll have a 15-minute Q&A session. So if you have any burning question, I'd like to encourage you to use the Q&A function, and we'll respond to questions later in the call. So first, why are we here? We are here because things are going gobsmackingly bananas. Does anyone know where this is coming from? I had, when I saw this expression, I was like, what is this? Any idea? Feel free to unmute yourself if you know where this is coming from, or type it in the chat. No one? So these were the words used by a prominent climate scientist just a few days ago to describe the global temperature anomalies for the month of September 2023. You can Google the term, though I think the actual news isn't getting nearly the media attention it deserves. But yeah, he described those anomalies as being gobsmackingly bananas. And if seeing data plotted on the graph doesn't resonate, I just wanted to take a moment to show what the last few months of extreme climate events around the world look like, from Canada back in June to Greece, Hawaii wildfires, to Sydney just a couple of weeks ago under the smoke from hazard reduction burns to try and prevent what could be the worst bushfire season in the history of the country. We are in a climate emergency. The case for climate action is stronger than ever. But I'm guessing you're here because you already know that, and you're here because you want to help. And if you happen to work for a company, you might be able to help more than you think. At Work for Climate, we are on a mission to accelerate climate action using the most powerful tool a business has, and that's the people who work within it. So we work with passionate employees who want to harness their power to turn their companies into climate champions from the inside out. We give these employees tools, resources, and access to a community of like-minded people from other companies they can learn with and from. And in this webinar, we're going to show you exactly how you can make a difference in your job, even when, and I guess especially when, you don't work in sustainability. But first, it's helpful to remind ourselves of the goal. We are collectively working to keep our planet under the threshold of 1.5 degrees of warming. That's a threshold that has already devastating consequences for humans and the living world. And to stay within the 1.5 degrees threshold, what we need to do, again, collectively, is achieve global net zero, which is a state of equilibrium between the CO2 emissions that humans emit and what we are able to pull from the atmosphere. It looks relatively easy when you look at it like this, but really what we're looking at is a complete transformation of our economy to allow for about 90% reduction in this climate pollution that we generate today. And I think talking about the overhaul of the economic system might not be super helpful for anyone. So in this webinar, we want to focus specifically on the role of business in this transformation. So companies, as we know, have a disproportionate climate impact, but it also means that they play an outsized role in the solutions. And we see three main things that companies can and must do. The first one is reducing climate pollution across their own operations and their supply chain. That's what net zero is mostly about. That's the term that we hear very often. And most companies start with their own operations first, but then as they advance, more and more companies are also integrating their supply chains into their net zero targets, and any ambitious net zero target should include supply chains. But net zero isn't enough. So the second thing is that companies need to do is shape government policy and create the public and political context for change. This is especially true if you work for a large company, because large companies have immense influence. But the same thing can apply to small businesses, because small businesses also have a voice and they engage with the public in many ways. And the third thing is to build the low carbon products and services that the world needs. And conversely, thinking about transitioning the current products and services to make them compatible with this 1.5 degrees world that we're imagining. Because we have a remaining carbon budget, which is the amount of pollution that we're able to generate until we hit the threshold, we need to take a hard look at those products and services that companies are selling and think about whether they are in service of the low carbon, thriving, just and equitable world that we're trying to build, or are they undermining this very world? So if you think about the role of business, think about these three things. But let's try and break things down a little bit more so we have a practical framework to work with. I would like to introduce you the Work for Climate Blueprint for Climate Action. These are the most strategic, important interventions that need to happen in every company. The first one is energy. We need companies to transition their energy supply to renewables, and that's starting with electricity. The second one is emissions, and that's about companies committing to and delivering on science-aligned net zero targets. And in our programs, we elaborate on what this means for a company to be aligned with the science on their net zero targets. The third one is investment, money. And this is about a concept called financed emissions, which is the ways that companies' money is invested either in climate destructions or climate solutions. So we show you how to get your company to tackle those financed emissions, whether it's employee retirement funds, superannuation in Australia, but other funds or other equivalents in other countries, or whether it is about corporate cash and companies' investments. The fourth one is advocacy. And this is about companies lobbying and any advocacy work, which is the way that they shape the public opinion. So we want companies' voices to be aligned with pro-climate policy. And the final one, the fifth intervention in the Work for Climate blueprint, is what we call Scope X. This is specifically about professional services, whether it's the creative sector, advertising, law firms, consulting firms, etc., how professional services have been enabling the fossil fuel industry and other polluting industries to expand and operate. There is a role for every company to play in this intervention, whether you work for a professional company or not, because if you work for a company, you use the services of providers who may work with those companies. Those 5 interventions are aligned with the frameworks created by our friends from Project Drawdown. If you haven't heard about them, I highly recommend checking out their Climate Action at Work guide. It's a really powerful resource for any employee looking to take climate action. And again, the Work for Climate blueprint is aligned with this framework. So making all these changes happen is going to take a lot of work and employee bandwidth. So what we need at the moment is for organizations to move from a state where climate and sustainability are no one's job to climate and sustainability are someone's job or a team's job, to finally climate and sustainability are everyone's job. If you work for a small or medium-sized business, it's likely that your company is in the first bucket because small businesses are under-resourced and typically sustainability doesn't fall under the responsibility of anyone until the company gets big enough to make their first hire in sustainability or climate. But if you work for a large company, it's likely that there is at least one person or even a whole team or even an army of sustainability people working on this. But what we would advise is not assuming that because your company has a sustainability team, you don't need to get involved. That's exactly the opposite. The sustainability team needs your help, and we'll show you exactly how. In other words, every job is a climate job. And you might have heard this saying before. If you have heard it a lot and you're getting sick of it, I'm sorry. But also maybe it's the first time you're hearing it. Every job is a climate job. This comes from, again, our friends from Project Drawdown. We think a lot at Work for Climate about what this means. Every job is a climate job. What does it mean? And I guess to me, it's the fundamental idea that in order to achieve this transformation, this massive transformation that we talked about, we need more people working on climate solutions. We need millions of people working directly on climate solutions. But no matter the number of green jobs or sustainability jobs out there, it will never be enough. We need more people, billions of people, engaging exactly from where they are. We can't make every job a direct climate solutions job, but we can make current jobs working in service of climate. And if you think of the typical company org chart, it looks something like this, where you have different departments reporting to the CEO, or key functions like finance, strategy, product. And sustainability is a department, but in the best case scenario, they have a direct line to the CEO, but often they report to other functions. And sustainability has their own strategy and targets, but these often end up conflicting with the wider business strategy and goals. And these departments tend to typically not talk to each other much. So the org chart really should look something like this, where the sustainability department is responsible for setting the strategy and the objective, but the actual implementation sits with every other department. And all employees, no matter what's their department, they work hand in hand with the sustainability department. This is an organization where climate is truly everyone's job. So if we say Batman is the head of sustainability, then every other employee should see themselves as a Robin to their Batman. That's the best analogy I found to describe it. And we call these employees climate entrepreneurs. So a climate entrepreneur is an employee working to align their organization with climate goals. Climate entrepreneurs are working to create change in the company. Some of them work in sustainability, but most of them don't. And they're taking climate action more subtly, trying to influence change within their company off the side of their desk. They are, again, the Robin to their Batman. And we see 4 different types of climate entrepreneurs. I'm going to run through each of them. So the first one is the practitioner. The practitioner is someone who is directly developing or implementing climate-related changes in the company. So it could be someone from the operations team involved in switching the company's energy providers, for example, or the sustainability person. They work directly in one of the teams that is connected to one of the interventions that we talked about. The second one is the influencer. They are less directly connected to implementing climate-related changes, but they are using their power to make them happen through influencing others to act. So, for example, an influencer could be someone who's trying to convince their boss to advocate for a company net zero commitment at senior leadership meetings. The next one is the protector. The protector is someone who has a fair bit of formal power in the organization and uses that to help other climate entrepreneurs get things done. So they are a support and they provide a safe cover for others to get things done. And the last one is the navigator. So where the protector tends to open up formal structures in the organization, the navigator helps doing that through informal channels. So they help build the power of other climate entrepreneurs right across the organization. And to do this, they might do things like create a staff sustainability community to connect climate entrepreneurs together. So they're really a connector. They might also coach other climate entrepreneurs. These 4 types of climate entrepreneurs, we go a little bit more deep into them in our programs. And after the webinar, I'd like to invite you to take a moment to reflect on which of these types you might want to be to start working for climate in your company. And it's likely that you will identify with a combination of them, not just one of them. And also your role might evolve as you start working for climate more actively. Your role as a climate entrepreneur ultimately is at the intersection of the changes needed in your company and your skills and resources for influence. So I invite you to take note of this diagram and reflect on what that might look like for you in your context. And at Work for Climate, we often go back to the concept of leadership. So leadership is defined as accepting responsibility for enabling others to achieve a shared purpose under conditions of uncertainty. And if we think about what that means for entrepreneurs, I think this quote from an entrepreneur in our network beautifully captures the idea of enabling others. So they said, what I've learned is that I can be a facilitator. I don't need to be the expert, and I don't have to do it all myself. I need a team, people in different parts of the world with different experiences of the topic. It's been an interesting journey finding those people and getting to know the company. Finding a team is about finding allies. How do we find our allies in an organization? We have a whole lesson in the Work for Climate Academy about this, but I just want to show you a preview of this tool that we use a lot called power mapping. So power mapping allows you to identify the stakeholders in your company based on the amount of power that they hold and the level of climate ambition. This helps identify allies and also the stakeholders you want to influence. Those stakeholders with high level of ambition at any level of power are the allies. And those with high level of powers but lower level of climate ambition are the influencing targets. And this might sound a little bit theoretical, but in the Work for Climate Academy, we go a lot deeper into how you can practically influence them to use their power to take positive climate action. And when we think about influencing others, it's about changing mindsets. So one of the questions we get asked the most is, how do I convince others to change, whether it's their mind or behavior? So here's another tool for you called the zone of transformation. This framework helps understand how change happens. And usually change happens when the status quo stops working for us or becomes uncomfortable. But, and that's a big but, if things get too uncomfortable, we're not willing to change. So we are in the lower zone here called the zone of complacency, where things are just too comfortable. If things are getting too uncomfortable, then we're not willing to change. We shut down, and that's the zone of resistance at the top. So what we're aiming for is a healthy level of discomfort, and that's the zone of transformation right at the middle, where it feels uncomfortable but safe enough to make a change. So when you're trying to influence others, you're aiming for that zone of transformation. These, again, are tools that we explore in the leadership components of our program, where we help you develop those influencing skills. But to end my presentation, I'd like to leave you with some practical things you can do to get started with this idea of working for climate and being an entrepreneur. So the first thing is going back at the looking at the Work for Climate blueprint and asking yourself, what are we doing in each of these areas of energy, emissions, money, advocacy, and scope X, and what are we not doing? So take a note of what's happening inside your company. The second one is creating or joining an existing climate action community, and that might be starting from the existing green team, but letting it be focused on climate specifically and using that blueprint we showed for ambitious climate action. From your initial assessment, developing a list of ask or actions or questions that you could take to your company, and maybe have a go at this power mapping exercise. So working out who are the decision makers, what do they care about, and who do they listen to. And lastly, maybe just try an intervention. So maybe try speaking up at the next all hands meeting, or something that might feel a little bit easier is very simply just have a conversation with a colleague. What is our company doing? What else can we do? How can we take our company's response to the next level? That is the end of my presentation, and now I'd like to take the opportunity to have a conversation with one of our fellow Work for Climate community member. So please welcome Laura Wilson to the call. I might actually stop sharing the slide so that it feels more like conversation. So
and much better so I don't have to look at my face there as well.
Laura. So just to introduce Laura, so Laura has been working at Specialized Bicycle Australia for the past 13 years. She's currently focused on strategy and sustainability, and she's the board director for Rewrite Australia, along with a member of the Bicycle Industries Australia Sustainability Committee. Outside of work, Laura is passionate about photography, surfing, riding her gravel bike, and being out in nature. And Laura happens to just have completed our academy course, so she's got a lot of insights into being a climate entrepreneur. Thank you so much, Laura, for being with us today.
Thanks, Laura.
So I'd like to start us off with a question about your journey coming into this work. So how did you come to realize that you could do something about climate change at work?
Okay, so probably a couple of years ago. I just started looking at sort of different things that we could do around, it was even just in the office, and there were small things like, oh, we need to start doing some recycling, you know, how are we managing our waste? I started talking to people about like bringing their takeaway coffee cups into the office. And I think for me, I was looking at it like, well, that's actually not enough. And I just started listening to podcasts. I think if you haven't listened to Nate Hagen's podcast, you need to. It's amazing, and it will be so many wow moments for you. But that's sort of where it started for me. And I did actually come across Work for Climate on Instagram. And I think I was at I could see that there was a course coming up. And I kept bugging everyone, whether it was through emails, Instagram, messaging, and saying, when is this course happening? I need it. I need to do it. And so, yeah, once I actually started doing the course, for me, it made me realize how much more there is, as opposed to not just recycling, not just takeaway coffee cups, all of those things. It's so much bigger. And as even Laura just highlighted, with everything from, you know, renewable energy, how we're investing our money, you know, reducing our impact and things like that. So for me, that was a really big moment, and it just went from there.
That's amazing. And yeah, I hear this a lot, like keep cups are amazing, but we are not going to keep our way out of the climate crisis. So that's a fantastic journey. And I guess my next question is asking you, because we talk about this concept of being a climate entrepreneur, but it might have a lot of different meanings for different people. So can you talk to us about what it means for you to be a climate entrepreneur?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so even just pointing to those roles that you had before, like practitioner, influencer, and things like that, I think I've moved across all of those roles throughout the academy, whether it's been, because obviously I mentioned I've got sustainability in my role, but there's also so many other areas of like influencing. We're part of a global brand, so how do I work with our global business to influence certain things to make them happen. I've actually got notes, so just want to bear with me. For me, actually, being a climate entrepreneur, it was very much like outside of work, I feel like climate change can be so overwhelming. But once you're in the office doing the academy, you've got this framework that you can follow, and you actually feel like you've got a bigger purpose than your normal everyday role. So it really gives you purpose, it empowers you, it gives you confidence to get out there and actually start doing those things within the guidelines and frameworks that you've provided.
That's fantastic. I think everyone will have a different interpretation of what it means for them to take action on climate, and hopefully those four archetypes of entrepreneurs help figure out what is this role. So can you talk to us a little bit about what is it that you've been trying to change at work? How's it going, and any challenges?
Oh, yes. So a couple of things. So we've started the switch to 100% renewable energy. At the moment, we've got our office, our DC. We have 3 owned retail locations. So we've moved them all from AGL and Origin over to Diamond Energy. So that's been a great first step. We're next looking at the green energy program within that, and then at the moment we're also investigating solar panels, so which is fantastic. So that's a great move there. Many conversations around so many different things, but looking at my notes here, packaging working group, we have a lot of single-use plastics that come in on our products, and so I have instigated a packaging working group with our global business, so bringing in people from other markets or countries, as well as our packaging team. So really have helped to instigate that, which has been really exciting. Even started conversations around fossil fuel sponsorship with events. So that was a big one. And that actually even, Henry, you messaged me with a question around, what are your thoughts on Santos sponsoring Tour Down Under? And for me, I was like, oh my gosh, of course. Like, how didn't I even think of that before? And so, I'm very fortunate that I am part of We Ride Australia, the Sustainability Committee, which is part of advocacy as well. So having conversations and bringing that up as a topic has been a real big, I suppose, learning curve for me as well, and navigating those conversations and having the support from Laura, Henry, Lucy, Lydia, everyone. So it's been fantastic, and even connecting me with front runners as well. So yeah, watch that space as well. We're even having discussions around superannuation, and even I'm going to do an energy awareness presentation and build out a bit of a playbook that can be shared with our other markets as well. So yeah. And also we're building out a sustainability champion program across the business. So yeah.
That is, you're very busy and doing this, I guess on top of all of your existing responsibilities. So well done. I remember you describing being a climate entrepreneur as playing a game of chess, where you've got different things going on, different moves, and you're trying to look at the whole board rather than each pawn in isolation. I think that was a very beautiful way of thinking about this work.
Yeah, very much so. And even sort of looking at it from definitely more that bird's eye view and seeing where you can move things and hopefully checkmate and deliver on some good things.
And can you tell us what you've enjoyed about doing the Work for Climate Academy, and how the experience has been for you?
For me, there's been so many, I suppose, aha moments, and every day, whether I've finished a little bit of the module, or we've had a learning partner session. So I'm not sure if you've mentioned that we have learning partner sessions. So you're partnered up with someone in another business, and it's incredible how much you can learn from them, because we often just get caught in our own little bubble. So to understand what challenges they have, what are they I suppose trying to instigate in their business, and sort of bouncing off ideas as well. So I've been connected with another lady at Seek, and so it's been fantastic to learn about how she's been rolling out some initiatives there as well. What else? There's also the Academy Live Labs. So it's pretty much coaching in a, I suppose a Zoom setting, but that's been fantastic, and really learning how to, so that concept of storytelling, but then also asking questions. And I think one of the questions was sort of a bit of a tool, because I was like, oh, how do I bring this conversation up with someone within the business? And I can't remember, Laura or Lydia had asked a question like, why don't you ask them, like, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind? So really putting that back onto them. But I think even for us, like, what is the legacy that we want to leave behind? And so I think by being a climate entrepreneur allows us to just have that much more purpose in what we're doing as well. So yeah, it's been great.
Thanks. Yeah, asking those big questions, I think it makes me think about that idea of the zone of transformation. So asking something that makes people slightly uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough that it shuts them down. And a question like this would definitely be right there in the middle. Amazing. I have so many more questions, but I'm also conscious that we might have questions from the audience. So I'll ask one last question, which is any advice that you would give to someone who's just getting started with this idea of being a climate entrepreneur and taking climate action in the workplace?
I think even just asking ourselves that question is a good start. Like, really, what do we want to leave behind, and what having conversations. Just start having a conversation. Find allies. So find people who might be on the same page as you, and I think caring. The more we care, the more we have conversations. And if we show that we care, other people will start to care as well.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Laura.
Okay.
All right. Any question from the audience to Laura, or anything you'd like to respond that is making you, I don't know, reflect in any ways?
Laura, we have a question in the chat, which is not specifically directed at Laura. It's probably more of a general question, but I'll throw it out to both of you. But Laura, if perhaps you wanted to tackle this one. From Anne in the Q&A, are there existing regulations or guidelines for companies with respect to sustainability actions, and how does ESG fit in?
Yeah, great question. I think these are the questions that typically someone, who doesn't work in sustainability would ask to the sustainability department. And if you work in sustainability, like, this is your bread and butter. So I'm not an expert in any way on regulations, but yes, there are lots of them. How it relates to ESG, I guess, well, this is the E in ESG, right? Environment, social, and governance. There's a lot of traction for ESG reporting guidelines, frameworks, compliance, etc. I think, again, this is where we need to go back to what's the ultimate goal and what is the company doing that contributes to the goal. Regulations are so important, reporting frameworks so important, but we are getting to the point where ESG and sustainability professionals are literally, like, it's becoming too much, and that's their whole job. And this is also why they need help from everyone else in the organization. I think I saw a stat recently that there was more reporting frameworks for emissions for companies than companies actually meeting the high standard for climate action. So we're getting to the point where it's like death by framework. So what I would encourage everyone to do is, if you are a sustainability professional, then like this is your job, but how do we go beyond the framework and the regulation to make things happen? Because yeah, it's but regulations are coming. Just one example, in Australia, it's they were going to have mandatory disclosures for scope 1, 2, and 3. So I don't want to get into the technical here, but basically companies will be required to disclose their emissions, and things like that will definitely help. I hope that was a comprehensive answer, you know.
Thanks, Laura. I thought it was an amazing answer. And if you have any further questions, feel free to jump in. We've got one in the chat and we've got one in the Q&A. I'll take the Q&A one first, which is, what do you do if the people at the top business layer are not on board? Our exec board is full of old white males. Perhaps I'll take a moment to respond to that one very quickly. And just say that this is kind of like the real grunt work of what we try to coach people on and help people on at Work for Climate, is the concept that obviously if you're building a business case that is purely based on cost, you're never going to be able to get those leaders of businesses on board with your business case, because the short-term costs might be seen as somewhat prohibitive. So what we try to do is help you using the power mapping tool that Laura pointed to earlier on, and figuring out like one or two of those critical decision makers and building a picture of what kind of things will move them, will help them to think about the legacy that they want to leave, want to think about the legacy that their company is leaving in the world. And we teach a bunch of different tactics and influencing strategies to help you add things into your business case that are heart-based as well as the head-based things. Yeah, like thinking about your company and your brand, if you like, and what the origin story is of that business, why it exists, and really trying to tie the climate story and the moral and ethical positioning, like tying it into your business and why it exists and how it's serving people, and figuring out a way that you can position it as this is the only path forward for us as a business. But yeah, we cover a lot of that stuff. Laura, feel free to add anything in that I missed there. Otherwise, I'll jump to the next question.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Answer, Lucy.
We have a question in the chat, which is, if a company has a net zero 2050 goal and has achieved climate active certification for carbon neutrality, does it mean that they're already doing everything they can? Laura.
That is a great question. I might throw it in back to the audience. Use the raise your hand function if you think a company that has a net zero goal by 2050 and has achieved climate active certification is doing everything they can. Just intuitively, I guess. Also, I realize I don't want to put people on the spot, so don't raise your hand if you don't want to. So one thing with this concept of carbon neutrality, carbon neutrality is a concept that exists at the planetary level. So we had a slide in the presentation showing what it looks like for the world to achieve carbon neutrality or net zero. This concept has been used by countries and increasingly by other entities like companies to sort of demonstrate their climate action credentials. So now we have, products that are carbon neutral, events that are carbon neutral, companies that are carbon neutral, and it waters down the concept a lot. In a way, I think it doesn't really have much meaning for a company to be carbon neutral in a world that isn't. So what we really need is companies acting to meet the urgency and magnitude of the challenge. But at the same time, I guess I recognize the need for companies to demonstrate what they're doing, and for ambitious schemes that help differentiate between the companies that are not doing much from the companies that are doing a lot. Climate Active, so for those who aren't familiar, is the government scheme for companies to claim carbon neutrality, and it works on the classic trio of measure, reduce, offset, except the reduce part is not very comprehensive in the Climate Active framework, and you end up having a lot of companies that are certified Climate Active, even though it doesn't really look like they're doing everything they can. So if you go on the Climate Active website, you'll see a lot of companies that are typically not associated with ambitious climate action, like the big banks investing in fossil fuels, big energy companies. I think even Empol, which is, the fuel provider, is certified Climate Active. I think that says something about the level of the certification.
To follow on directly from that, Celine has put a question in the chat saying, I do a lot of purchasing for my company. I do find it hard sometimes to figure out whether the company I'm purchasing from is just greenwashing, which I think ties a lot to that Climate Active question. Is there a website or platform that helps people rank the environmental sustainability of the company, Laura?
There are more and more platforms that are being developed, especially on that Scope 3 emission space. So again, without getting technical, Scope 3 are those supply chain emissions. So whether it's upstream or downstream your supply chain, but basically every emissions associated with what companies buy or what they sell. And so, yes, there are websites that help assess the sustainability credentials of suppliers and get that emissions data down to the level of, a product or a supplier. So we have a few examples. In Australia, I'm thinking, depending on your sector, I might follow up with you to advise on a few platforms that you want to look at. We'll follow up on this one.
Thanks, Laura. And there's one last question directed at Laura, and Anne will also pick up on your follow-up question in the Q&A as well, around training and courses for starters in climate change, but I think Laura will pick up on that shortly. From Oliver, Laura, to what extent has taking action at work helped alleviate your climate and eco-anxiety that you may have been feeling? And has it changed your outlook or hopefulness around our climate situation?
It's definitely made me feel more hopeful. I never realized before doing Work for Climate how much impact corporations can have on doing the right thing. And so I feel, even some of the work I've been doing is just having conversations. And so with our managing director, she recently went over to our global headquarters in the US, and she was completely championing the whole climate change conversation. And there is so much we can do. Yes, we are a bike brand. Yes, there's sort of the bike can be seen as a solution for, part of the solution. If more people rode bikes, how good would that be? But there's so much work that we need to do, and she was out there championing that, and that made me so hopeful that we can do something. And yeah, so I don't know if I answered that properly, sorry, but yeah, more hopeful, and I feel good about what I'm doing for sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Laura. That was a wonderful answer. And I've noticed that Renelle has just posted a link in there, I think, to the previous question about greenwashing accreditation. So everyone check that out. And Laura, I will hand it back to you. And there is a question from Anne about courses or how you would recommend people who are starting out in climate change, like what are great resources for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do have a lot of resources that we can point people to. Of course, I'm going to be a little bit biased and recommend our own training course, the Work for Climate Academy. There is a knowledge component that teaches the fundamentals of corporate climate action. I guess a broader overview of the climate problem and the different ways to approach it would be a course by an organization called terra.do. Their course is called Learning for Action, and that's probably the most comprehensive overview into climate change that I've seen out there. The other one that comes to mind when it comes to companies and climate change specifically would be a course by the insurance company, actually, interestingly, AXA. So AXA is an insurance provider, and they've built a climate school with a really, really excellent course, again, on how companies' response to climate change looks like. And it's got a big component on climate science as well. So yeah, these would be the three that I would recommend.
Thanks, Laura. I think that's it for questions, and I think that we are at time. So over to you to wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up. So let me see if I can share my screen again. Yes. Thank you, everyone, for those really excellent questions. Always makes me very energized. So just a few next steps for you to get started. So we are going to paste links in the chat for a few of our programs that might be helpful in your work for climate journey. So the first one is our community of climate entrepreneurs or climate action champions. This is a free community where you can connect with like-minded peers and join exclusive community events. Some on, from how to build up your knowledge in climate to how do we deal with climate anxiety, or how do we build up those leadership skills. We have a range of community events coming up. The second one is we have just actually today launched our Work for Climate Academy Taster, which is a free course which is meant to be useful on its own, but also give you a bit of a taste to what the full Work for Climate Academy looks like. So there's a few modules in there about knowledge of corporate climate action, as well as the leadership side of things that we showcased a little bit in this presentation. So this course is free. We'll put a link to join, and accessing the course will also give you access to the community. And yeah, we'll send those links in a follow-up email along with the recording of this webinar. And yeah, with that, this is the end. Thank you so much for joining today. And I'd like to invite everyone to check out with one word to put in the chat, one word that comes to mind now when you think about making your job your most powerful climate tool. So I'm going to look for those words in the chat. And again, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for the work you do, and please get in touch if we can help in any way. Energized, optimistic, empowered, hopeful, pumped. Oh, I love it. Thank you. Encourage. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, Laura.